You're dehydrating onions and all of a sudden you check and find out they're turning pink or maybe even brown. Are they weird? Do you have to throw them away? Have they been ruined forever and you wasted all of your time? I got some answers for you next. Hi folks, it's Darcy from the Purposeful Pantry, and we talk about dehydrating all the time. When I was working on a super secret project that's going to come out in a couple of weeks, I had something happen that I've never had happen before. My onions turned pink. So you might find that sometimes when you are dehydrating and you pull out your trays and you see weird colors happening to your onions, don't fret, it's fine. So exactly what is it that's happening when your onions turn color in your dehydrator? Now one, it can turn green, which is a sulfuric acid response to heat. That's still fine. You might have that happen on the stovetop when you're trying to get your onions ready for a meal. You might find they turn a weird color. It's fine. They're going to be fine. But what happens when they turn pink or brown in your dehydrator? Sometimes it's the sugar content in those onions. Even white and yellow onions may have a higher sugar content depending on the season they were grown in, where they were grown, what the conditions were. There are all sorts of reasons why that sugar content will be varied through varieties, through where they're grown and all that kind of stuff. Sweet onions tend to have a higher sugar content all the time, but it can happen with the white ones too. And as they dry, it's sort of something called bleeding, or just they turn pink because of that sugar starts to change colors. The pink color doesn't change anything either. They still taste like onions. They're just fine. Now, the second reason why it may change colors like the way is probably what's happened with me this time. I used a food processor to break these down into smaller bits. Now, typically I would go through a vegetable chopper, which I have, that just you place the slice on and you chop it and it puts in diced onions into the bin. I had so many to work through, I didn't want to take that time. So I threw them in the food processor because I wanted smaller chunks because we're working with some texture issues in our family and we wanted to make sure that those aren't going to be bigger chunks in this thing that we're working with. So I processed them in my food processor. Now, the bruising that happens to the cells of the onion are also a reason why they will change the color to pink. Now, in my case, because I dried my onions at 125F, which is 52C, I'm not thinking that the pink changed because of heat. Now that can happen as they start to caramelize. But for me, it's the food processing that changed that color. So you get a color that's like this. And I'll show you the tray as it came out of the dehydrator as well. Now, can you fix it? No. Does it matter? Not at all. They're still going to taste the same. But I rehydrated a few of these so that you could see what it looks like when they're rehydrated. Now, when I first put them in the water, they didn't change color. They just started getting soft. Over time, some of that color kind of dissipated into the water and the onions turned white again. And they still taste exactly the same and they look the same. And when you pull them out, they still look like wet, small, diced onions. So now when your onions go brown, they're not burned, they're caramelized, which is going to give it an incredible flavor. It's one reason why we make caramelized onions to dry, because the flavor just changes so much. In regular onions, when you're drying them, that caramelized flavor makes them taste a little toasty or maybe just fuller bodied, and that's okay. You're fine. Now, how can you stop the browning? First, turn your dehydrator down. Now, I usually run mine at 125F, 52C. But I know a lot of people do it at 135 because that's what's recommended by some books and stuff, but turn it down. And if you're running it at 125 and still see browning, turn it down a little more. Just know it's going to take a little bit longer, but it's going to be fine. Never fear if your onions change color. This is still going to store just fine. It's just going to look a little different than you're used to seeing. Use them just like you would any other time because they're perfectly safe to use. So if you want to see how I make caramelized onions, you can watch this video right here. They are supreme. I love them so much. And until I see you again next time, keep preserving.